It used to be, back when my grandpa was in business, it was a very Scandinavian part of town, very middle class, very normal, I guess you'd say. It was the main street of South Minneapolis, so it was like everything, anything you would need to buy was on Lake Street. It was the place to come to shop. So groceries and meat, all the way to cars. Cars were a big deal, car dealerships. Sears was a major presence, just a few blocks from us. And then in the 60s, they built the freeways and the suburbs started becoming more important, and Southdale was a cool new place to shop. And so a lot of the businesses left Lake Street and went to the suburbs where the shoppers were going. And Lake Street just sort of declined gradually over the next couple decades, I'd say. Just, we stayed because it's where we are. But the street, it just sort of declined. And then the crime did sort of increase a little bit, and there were a lot of empty stores until probably in about the 90s. Mid 90s was probably the lowest point. There was not much investment. Nobody was really doing anything.
I want to go back to 1966 when I came to Minnesota. I heard about, actually I used Lake Street. It was busy. Lots of stores, including the Sears we had back in New York, and so I went to Sears to buy a shirt or something. But of course the freeway wasn't in, I-94 wasn't there. So everything seemed to be the corridor of Lake Street, and it was quite busy. But over the years, my experience with Lake Street was that it turned into kind of a dumping ground.
Well, Lake Street, has suffered, but a lot of transformation or metamorphosis. It's still, in some sectors, but the Twin Cities or the seven-county region, Lake Street, depending what part of Lake Street, we're talking about. Obviously, everybody knows where the Uptown, where Lynn Lake, but very few people at that time were venturing, but beyond, but Lindale and Lake. Asking somebody, to go to the Chicago and Lake, well, things that no way, I'm not gonna go there, let alone at night. Somebody's gonna rob me. And yes, but Lake Street for a while has, but a very sad reputation. It was, but the crime-ridden, prostitution-ridden. There was a lot of pornography. It was, but a lost, but the street parts, Lake Street. Everything changed, but with the coming of immigrants, which, they were attracted, to those areas where, rent was accessible, and which still, have, a considerable, amount of traffic. So they could open a storefront and be assured that, there will be, customer coming to the store.
Yeah, so the business was just a meat market, neighborhood meat market for most of its first few decades. And then in 1974, we bought our building, my dad and his partner, and decided to expand and open a gift shop. And so that's when they hired me to run it. Little did they know I knew nothing about business. Just thought it would be a fun job to do for a couple of years. Well, I decided what else to do with my life, but it suited me, so I stayed. But my grandpa chose Lake Street because it was an important commercial corridor, and it has remained so. And we stayed there, even though I know there were talks back in the day when things were kind of tough about leaving and, going to the suburbs ourselves, but we wouldn't have stayed who we are anywhere else. I mean, where we are is so much a core of who we are. It's really hard to separate the two.
Well, it was a series of, the reason, I came, to Lake Street, not only because I needed, to have an office open to the public, And also, I wanted to be part of a community. At that time, when I moved, there were very few the Latino businesses in that corner, but I want to be part of that. I want to somehow, thought that it was a good idea that I will contribute it, whatever little I could contribute, to the growth of that, that community.
I can go back to 1991, where when I say we, a group of Latinos interested in beginning or starting a community, or at least realizing how big the Latino community was at that time. I was working with Catholic Charities at that time, and I was approached by a group of Latinos asking me where they could worship in Spanish, or where can they hear a service in Spanish.
Little by little, they gave me a single message, and that was, we want our own church. We want our own priest. We want our children to grow up in the language that we grew up in. We want them to study their faith in Spanish, but we want a church. And so that really had started blossoming at St. Stephen's. And within 15 months, we began masses in Spanish on a weekly basis. And so we went from 20 to maybe 40 people at a monthly mass to 200, almost 300 people at that first mass, where we invited as many people as we knew.
That's how the project of the Mercado Central came out of, because there was a lot of individuals that were interested in asking questions more than anything else about where can they get loans, or where can they open bank accounts and things like that. The leadership of this community came together, and once we established that understanding and that commitment to stick together, that was one of the ways we leverage also building or creating a bigger table to invite the partners and creating partnerships with nonprofits, institutions, and financial institutions, being that we came from a faith base.